everybody. Welcome to church. So glad you're here this weekend. And welcome to, as you heard, what is starting to feel like fall. It's a good time of year. If you're not a fan of sweater weather, I'm praying for you. But it's here, like it or not, and I'm glad you're here. And we are going to jump into the message in just a moment. But right before we do, I want to let you know about two things coming up over the next 2 weeks that I'm very excited about. I want to give you a heads up around. The first one is that around a year ago, last September, we launched a second location of our church in the West Wilmington area. We've been gathering at Brandywine. Yeah, it's good. The announcement hasn't come, but you're already excited. That we've been gathering at Brandywine Springs School, and it's been going great. But over the summer during COVID-19, the school, we've been having conversations with them. We have a great relationship with Brandywine Springs School. We've been talking back and forth, and they said, hey, we're so up in the air with what's going to happen this fall that we can't guarantee that we'll have space available every Sunday, especially space for kids ministry to happen. And so we've been working behind the scenes, having conversations with them over the past few weeks, and we have been talking with Wilmington Christian School in the Hockessin area. So I'm happy to let you know that Sunday, October 4th, our West Wilmington location will become our Hockessin location, and we'll be gathering at Wilmington Christian School. It's going to take me a minute to get everything straight, but I'm excited about this because a year ago when we launched that location, our original hope was to launch in the Hockessin area. We couldn't find space at the time that worked for us, and so Brandywine Springs School became available, but now it's kind of come full circle, and I'm grateful that God has opened the door for that space. So if you live in the Hockessin area, you say, well, how do I know? If you pronounce it Hockessin, you don't live in the Hockessin area. But if you live in Pike Creek or Hockessin or Greenville or Landenberg or Kennett Square or any of that surrounding area, love for you to consider being a part of this location. Great way to kind of get in on the ground floor of what God is doing at the Journey. We're one church in multiple locations, 2 physical locations, and then of course many of you gathering with us online, one of our online platforms. And this is a great opportunity for you to get involved. So you can go to our website, yourjourney.tv/Hockessin, and find out more information there. The second thing that I'm excited to share with you is that we've also been working behind the scenes the past few weeks to reopen our physical Journey Kids environments, and to do that safely, wisely, and well, provide space for our kids. It's fun, experiences that are aimed at them to help them know God, love God, live like He says. And so we are planning 2 weeks from now, that same weekend, October 3rd and 4th, at both of our physical locations to reopen Journey Kids for select gathering time. So stay tuned. We'll give you more details, but I'm very proud of our Journey Kids team and excited about being able to take this step. So would you give it up for our Journey Kids team, everybody? For all of you who serve there, thank you. And for all of you who serve, who are part of what was the West Wilmington location becoming our Hockessin location, thank you as well to you. Some great things in store for us this fall. And in the middle of that, we're in week 2 of this series that we've called Life Hacks. We're talking about solutions to life's everyday problems. And we're looking at 3 during this series that I really believe can make our lives overall better this fall, wherever we land spiritually. And if you were here week 1, last weekend, we talked about the first life hack, which is a shift from copying the world around us to being transformed by the God within us. If you missed that message, highly encourage you to go watch it on our YouTube channel, get caught up to speed, because it kind of sets the stage for the series as a whole. And then next week, we're going to talk about how to get more of the right people in our lives and maybe less of the people who aren't healthy for us, aren't good for us in our lives, so that you won't want to miss that. But this week, we are tackling what I really think is the heaviest weight that many of us will ever try to carry or ever try to move in our lives, the heaviest weight that we'll ever try to move. And to kick us off, I have a bad habit of underestimating how much things weigh. Anybody else have this problem? You go to move something and realize I've totally underestimated how much this piece of furniture weighs, and probably shouldn't be doing this alone. In fact, this happened this week. We're redecorating our house. We've lived in our house for 12 years and had a lot of stuff we just kind of put off. And so we're redecorating a little bit, and we have a piece of furniture that got delivered, was put in our garage. We weren't quite ready for it in the house yet. And it's heavy, too heavy. I know it's too heavy for me to lift alone. And it's been in the garage for some time now, but the other day I thought, well, maybe I can, and I leaned over and maybe I can, and herniated 8 discs in my back, I'm sure, and realized, oh yeah, I have this bad habit where I underestimate how much something weighs and I overestimate my own strength. This is a piece of furniture that even a person who's actually strong would struggle with. And I don't know how many of you can relate to that. If you're watching online right now, give me a biceps emoji in the comments. Let me know, and then I'll invite you over to help me lift that furniture. But we underestimate how much stuff weighs. We overestimate our strength. And I think a lot of us do this in life, not just when it comes to moving furniture, but when it comes to the tensions that enter our lives when somebody fails us or frustrates us or falls short for us. I really believe the heaviest weight most of us will ever try to move is not a piece of furniture. It's not a barbell at the gym, but it's a wrong that someone has committed against us, or a series of wrongs that have built up until they became too heavy for us to move, at least to move on our own. I think broken promises and betrayals and bad behavior on the part of somebody that we're in a relationship with, or we work for, or our business partners with, or go to school with, whatever the case may be, those things build up without us realizing it until the weight becomes too heavy for us to handle. And here's the thing, here's the tricky thing, is we continue to function and we work around and walk around our growing resentment for weeks or months or years. We may not even realize that it's there. We may kind of forget all about it. We buy into the old saying, forgive and forget. We think we've forgotten, but then one day inevitably we bump into it. We bump into all that stuff that we buried or we thought we were over, we thought we were good with. We bump into it. And in that moment, what we try to do is lift it and move it out of the way with all the right intentions. And we remember the good advice we've received, lift with your legs. We're trying to lift these offenses out of our lives, lift these issues, lift this resentment. And we get down and we can't get back up. And we're stuck there because it's too heavy. It won't budge. What are we supposed to do? Well, we need a hack. We need a life hack that would allow us to move even the heaviest things that show up in our lives, the unresolved issues, the resentment, the offenses, the wrongs that have been committed against us. And so that's what I want to do today, is give you this life hack from God's word when it comes to all of that stuff. And then we're going to look at a pretty radical example of this in action. So you ready? Here we go. Life hack number 2. Here it is in the book of Colossians in the New Testament of the Bible. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Now, let me just say right out of the gate, this is written to all of us who have said yes to following Jesus. We've entered into a real relationship with God through faith in Jesus. We're following him. Maybe we're brand new to that. Maybe we've been following him for a long time. But this is written to those of us who said, I believe in Jesus. He's leader and Lord of my life. And so if that's not you yet, you can take a pass on this. But for all of us, and that doesn't mean that you don't need to forgive, we all do. But this is really written with 2 instructions that we can only grasp fully when we understand what our relationship with God through Jesus really means. And I don't know if you notice that there are 2 instructions. The first one is a life hack for moving light weights, smaller issues, things that aren't really a big deal. It's a life hack. And the second one is a life hack for moving heavier weights, things that are a big deal, things that require some effort. And the first instruction is make allowance for each other's faults. So while the weight is still manageable, move it out of your life. Make allowance, create some space, create some margin. What that means is I factored it into the relationship. I made allowance in advance. I knew you were going to have some faults. I may not have known the exact dumb thing you were going to do, but I factored in that you're a human. Like I knew that something was coming. It was inevitable. You couldn't be perfect. You couldn't live up to my standards. Nobody could. I factored that in. I'm making allowance for you. You're making allowance for me. So we're good because we're making allowance. So let me park there for just a minute because this is important. I think some of us, when we hear about forgiveness, we think forgiveness is something we should be doing all the time. So we're kind of like, oh, okay, I forgive you. I forgive you that you cut me off in traffic. I need a deep work of God in my life around this, but I forgive you. You brought me cold cold coffee. I forgive you. Didn't take out the trash. Let me go get with God for 3 hours and work out my intense issues around that. If you're doing that all the time, the issue is not with the other person. All right, so you gotta just make allowance. Not everything needs to be forgiven. Some stuff's just like, you're human, I'm human, make some allowance, create some space. Go ahead, cut me off in traffic. I'm not gonna lose my mind over it. Baby steps, I'm gonna make some allowance. You're human. To give you an example for Susie, my wife and I, early in our marriage, we did not do a good job of making allowance for each other's faults. We expected perfection from each other. And so when we ultimately, inevitably failed to live up to each other's standards, the weight accumulated and we had resentment in our lives toward each other. And our marriage had tension in it at times because we couldn't make allowance for each other. And our relationship got so much better and so much freer when we started realizing, oh, I married a human. I did not marry someone who's perfect. I married a human, and so did they. And we have these faults, and we just got to make some space. Everybody tracking with me? So everybody just kind of take a deep breath and go, okay, I need to probably need to make some more allowances. So need to make a few more allowances. And it's not that I'm letting people walk all over me by any stretch, but I'm just recognizing I'm human too. I probably would have used my blinker when I cut you off, but hey, I'm making some allowances, creating some space, make allowances, okay? That's important. But God's word recognizes there are times when we can't just make allowances. And we try the first instruction, we try to make allowance, but it doesn't work because someone climbs up over the allowance that we've made for their humanity and really offends us, does something wrong, and we can't just pretend it doesn't matter or it's not a big deal or it's okay, because it becomes a weight in our lives. And when that happens, the second instruction kicks in, which is forgive. Forgive anyone who offends you. Now, so far in the message, we are all on the same page. You don't have to believe the same thing about God or the Bible or any of that. We all get this. Dr. Phil says this, Oprah says this. Nobody reasonable is out there saying, hey, here's the path to a great life. Let resentment build up, hold people's failures against them forever, and become a miserable person. No one says that. Yet we do it. So we need a hack. We need a different approach. And unfortunately, this life hack only works if you believe in Jesus. It doesn't mean you can't forgive if you don't believe in Jesus, can't get over it, can't take the high road. But the key to this working is that we fully forgive people by remembering that the Lord forgave us. You can't do that if you haven't accepted that the Lord has forgiven you yet. So what does that mean? Well, how does the Lord forgive us? What's the good news about Jesus? That God has forgiven all of our sins. If I believe in his son, Jesus, I enter into a relationship with him and all of my sins are forgiven completely and unconditionally. Past, this is wild, past, present, and future. I've been unconditionally, completely forgiven of my sins through faith in Jesus. And the more I remember that that's how the Lord forgave me, then the more I am equipped to move the weight of other people's offenses toward me by forgiving them. And think about how disproportionate the relationship is between me and the Lord. He's perfect. Here's perfect God. Here's Mark. It's not like, see, if you do something wrong, I can at least say, well, I don't like that you did that, but I recognize that I've made mistakes as well. God does not have that out. God can't go, man, Mark really messed that day up, but I get it. No, he doesn't get it. Perfect God, totally imperfect Mark, and yet he has completely, unconditionally, 100%, gotta catch this, forgiven my sins through no effort of my own, but totally by his grace in giving his son, and then giving me the gift of faith in his son so that I could believe in him and be completely forgiven. This is the good news about Jesus. And it's good news. It was the best news ever. The problem is, for many of us, we have not really accepted entirely that we have been forgiven that way. We still kind of hold on to thinking we need to earn some of God's forgiveness. And because we think we need to earn God's forgiveness, that's why we require other people to earn ours. But when we start to understand how the Lord forgave us, then we can begin to move the weight. Now, it still requires effort. So what does it look like practically to move the weight, to forgive? And to answer that, I want to look at a story in the Old Testament of the Bible. It's a story that has fascinated me over the past year or so. I don't know why I've been drawn to it again and again. It's the story of two kings, Saul and David. And to give you the short version, Saul was a bitter, resentful, insecure guy who ended up messing up his life and the life of just about everybody who got close to him. Tragic story. He was so insecure, so resentful, refused to forgive, so driven by his jealousy, he messed up his life and the life of everybody who got close to him. David, on the other hand, was a confident, kind of brash, imperfect, but forgiving guy who ended up blessing up his life and the life of just about everybody who got close to him. Did you know you can mess up your life or you can bless up your life? It's really a choice. And David said, I choose to bless up my life. He wasn't perfect, didn't have it all together, but where Saul, and here's the tragic thing about Saul, is God had given Saul a great gift, great opportunity to be the king of the nation of Israel, but for the second half of his life, he neglected that and focused on his jealousy and hatred toward David, and he tried everything he could to make David's life miserable. Chased him all over the country, tried to kill him, tried to discredit him, wouldn't let up. And in the middle of all of that, here's what David says to his mortal enemy, Saul. May the Lord judge between us. Perhaps the Lord will punish you for what you are trying to do to me, but I will never harm you. Now, how do you get to that place? What does it look like to move the heaviest weight that most of us will ever carry, which is the weight of somebody who has either wronged us in the past or is actively involved in wronging us now? How do you move that kind of weight? And I believe it looks like three choices I want to share with you today. Here's the first one. The first choice is to release the hurt to God. That's the first choice. And there's a weight in my life, I've got to release the hurt to God. How many guys in the room or maybe watching online right now, we're masters of sucking it up? Like when we hurt ourselves, we don't let it show. I'm a man, come on. And maybe some women too, like I'm right there. I don't show people my pain. I don't want to be stereotypical, but us guys, what? I'm good. Hit me again, I'm good. Had this happen this past week. It's been quite a week. This past week, rammed my toe on a step and I was wearing flip-flops. And it hurt so bad. It was like, But we had friends around. So I sucked it up. I was like, I'm good, what? I'm good. Purple is the normal color for a toe. My toe's always purple. Now, another message for another time, but many of us guys tend to have a different reaction if it's just our wife or just our mom around, but that's a different story. But I'm good. Inside, I'm like, but on the outside, I'm like, I'm good. You know, the problem with sucking it up is we fail to acknowledge when something really hurts. That's fine if it's a little thing, but it's a bad idea. Can I just tell you, it's not wise to suck it up when you've lost an appendage or you're losing blood or you're semi-conscious. Like, I'm good. No, the smart thing to do is to say, I'm not good. Take me to the hospital. There's no, you don't get extra points for letting something take you out when it really hurt and you needed help. And the pain was supposed to be a signal to do something different so you could recover from the injury. And I think the problem for a lot of us is that we've not really acknowledged, and some of us, and I hate this for us, some of us have been taught that to be a good Christian person is to pretend that nothing hurts. And really what we need to do is say, God, that person's backstabbing hurt. That abuse, it left a mark. That lie drew blood. Being used like that, it bruised me. It hurt. Why? Because sucking it up, all the pain, only works for so long. We got to call it out. We got to admit it. We got to release it to God. We can't move the weight until we acknowledge how heavy it is and until we accept that we can't move it without God. I've got to release the hurt to God. That's what David does here. He says, may the Lord judge between us. This hurts. I don't like it. It's not good. I can't move it on my own. I release it to God. May the Lord judge. When we don't release the hurt, it just gets heavier and heavier, even when we're not consciously thinking about it. So I had this experience recently where I realized I was having imaginary conversations in my head with someone who had offended me. Anybody else ever do this? It's the slowest hand raise ever. Like, I interrupted one, didn't I? You were having a... I know it's not helpful, but I realized all of a sudden I had an aha moment. Man, I've been having several of these imaginary conversations, arguments, and I won every single one, like dominated. My logic was impeccable. And I realized, I had this aha moment where I realized, oh, I get what I'm doing right now. I'm practicing. I'm rehearsing. I'm getting better at being bitter, which I don't think is what God has for my life. Experts say that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become really skilled at something. And I think a lot of us are close to becoming really skilled at resentment because we're coming up on about 10,000 hours of rehearsing the hurt, reliving it, replaying it, or kind of passive aggressively trying to bury it, pretend it doesn't matter what. I'm good. Purple's the normal color for a toe. And the problem is we're learning a skill that will kill our souls. And there's a better way, and the better way is to release the hurt to God. And David does this. In fact, you can read, there's an entire book in the Old Testament called Psalms. David wrote somewhere around half of those. And many of them are him like pouring out his hurt to God. He's not shy about it. Sometimes he's like, hey, God, would you just take my enemy out? Would you, they're bad. I don't like them. You say, well, is that okay? It's better than just thinking it and trying to fix it on your own. So David takes it to God, but then because he brings it to God, he's able to leave it with God. So instead of retaliating against Saul, he's like, no, I went and talked to God. This is why we practice a slot and spot. We talk about this all the time here. It's a time on your calendar and a place you go to be with God. And I think some of us have maybe the wrong impression. And some of us maybe even have said, I don't want a quiet time with God. That doesn't sound, then make it a loud time with God. Can I just tell you, I've had some loud times with God. Closed the door or got my car, drove somewhere, and was just like, God, this person's driving me crazy. I need your help. I want to punch him in the throat for your glory. You say, well, is that okay? God can handle it. And I'd rather take that hurt to him, put it all out there and leave it with him, and then I can drive home, pull in the driveway and be like, the weight is moved because I released the hurt to God. I don't need to retaliate. I don't need to simmer. I don't need to have imaginary conversations. I don't need any more imaginary conversations with the person who hurt me because I started having real conversations with the God who can heal me. That's the hack. Release it to God. Release it to God. So let me ask you the question today. What hurt do you need to release to God? And have a conversation with him about it. And don't be shy. Name it. Call it what it is. Get really honest with him. He can handle it. And then trust him to take care of you. God, what David says is, may the Lord judge between us. Like, I've got my opinion, but may the Lord judge. I'm releasing it to God. I can't carry this weight. I need God's help. Here's the second choice. Release the person to God. This one's kind of tricky because it requires another layer for us. In the weeks leading up to David saying to Saul what we read, here's the setting, okay? Saul's been chasing David for months. He's got a 3,000 person army and he's chasing David and he wants to kill David for no good reason. And in the process of that, Saul and his army stop outside a cave, and Saul says to his army, hey, I gotta go in the cave. And he goes in the cave to relieve himself. This is in the Bible, you gotta read it. It's 1 Samuel 24. I didn't make it up. Saul goes in the cave to do his business, and the deal is David and his men are hiding in the back of that same cave, as fate would have it. And David's men are like, Dave, dude, God just put your enemy in your hands. He doesn't have his army. He's vulnerable. He's not ready. Go get him. Go get him, Dave. And so Dave sneaks up behind Saul, but conviction comes on him. And so instead of killing Saul, David probably wouldn't have done that. He would have tapped him on the shoulder and said, all right, let's have it out, you and me. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he cuts off a tiny piece of fabric from Saul's robe. And then he sneaks back into the cave. Saul never notices. But then conviction from God comes on David, and he feels terrible that he cut a piece of fabric off the robe of somebody who was trying to cut his head off his shoulders. And so when Saul and his army are a distance from the cave, David comes out to the mouth of the cave with his guys behind him, and this is when he yells out to Saul, why are you trying to kill me? May the Lord judge between us. And then David says this, perhaps the Lord will punish you for what you are trying to do to me, but I will never harm you. Perhaps the Lord will punish you. David doesn't just release his hurt to God, he releases Saul to God. He says, not only is my hurt in God's hands, but you, Saul, you are in God's hands. I'm gonna stop trying to control you. I can't control what you do. I'm giving you over to God. Sometimes we ask God, why aren't you intervening in this situation? And God says, because you are. We can't both be God. I'm not gonna fight you for who's gonna be in control of this person's life. Clearly you think you are. And we get in God's way. Forgiveness is a choice. It's a choice to say, I'm not gonna keep trying to play God when it comes to this other person's behavior. Some of us, our emotions rise and fall with what somebody else does or posts or gets. Forgiveness is a choice. I'm gonna release the person to God. It's important because I think there are some of us who might be wrestling with this right now, and we're saying, hey, I get the forgiveness thing, I know. And I want to forgive, and I will as soon as they apologize. You can't control their remorse. You can only control your resentment. And forgiveness is a choice to say, I'm giving this person over to God. I release them. Perhaps the Lord will punish them, but he can't do that as long as I'm trying to be in control. And so I'm releasing this person to God. Who is the person that you need to release to God today? Maybe even right now, don't yell their name out loud. But maybe just under your breath, you just need to whisper to God, God, I release this person to you. I'm having an aha moment. I'm realizing my life is tied to their behavior. I don't want that. I'm cutting the string that attaches my soul to their actions. I'm releasing this person to you. If they succeed, that's for you, God. That's your call. If they fail, that's for you. I'm releasing them to you. Your plans, your ways, I'm trusting you to take care of me. Who do you need to release to God? And then here's the third choice, release the outcome to God. Once we've released the hurt, so we've acknowledged that it's real and purple is not the normal color for a toe, and we need help moving this weight. It's too heavy for us on our own. And then we've released the person. So we've said, God, I'm gonna stop waiting for this person to change their behavior before I change my attitude and my approach. By your grace, I'm gonna change whether they do or not. Now it's time to release the outcome, what happens ultimately to God. And this is probably the hardest step of all because it means giving up control of what will happen ultimately, eventually. We wanna tie a bow on things. And sometimes God allows us to be in this place where not only do we need to release the hurt and release the person, but we need to release the outcome of the whole situation and trust his plan for our lives. How do you know if you've released the outcome? When you can pray for and genuinely desire what's good for the other person, even though they didn't do what was good for you. Then you know you've released the outcome. So whatever happens with this situation, David says, Saul, I've released the hurt, may the Lord judge. I've released you, perhaps the Lord will punish you. It's not my place. But I'm going one step further. No matter what happens, I will never harm you. I've released my right to control the outcome to you, to God. Not to Saul, but to God. David says, I've released my right to control the outcome to God, and whatever you do, I will never harm you, Saul. So let me ask you, what outcome do you need to release to God right now? Maybe you've kind of said, yeah, I get it. I'm releasing the hurt. I'm releasing the person. I'm not going to act based on their actions. But maybe you've been holding on to, I do this sometimes, just holding on to a little bit of hope that you might get your way in the end. You might get your satisfaction. Little bit of right. Like you're not actively retaliating, but you're kind of like, well, I hope my ex sees this post. It's quiet in here. It's even quieter online. Some of us are going, well, I hate to say I told you so, but we don't really hate it. We're giddy. I knew things wouldn't work out for them. We're holding on to the outcome. We're playing God. Oh, we've released the hurt, we've released the person, but we're holding on to the outcome. I will never trust them. I have nothing against them. I will just never trust them again. Only God gets to use the word never. When we've released the outcome, that's a right we release. It's tough, isn't it? So where's an outcome that you're still keeping a little bit of hope alive, that you get to dictate what it looks like? And God is saying, hey, that's too heavy for you to hold. You're not God. And God's saying, I am. Will you give that weight to me? Let me control the outcome. Doesn't mean that the relationship will be reconciled. It takes two people to reconcile. It takes one to forgive. So it's the choice to say, I'm going to control one thing. I'm forgiving. I'm releasing. I'm surrendering to God the outcome. And that means believing. This goes back to the good news about Jesus. Believing that a God who gave his only son for us has a better outcome in mind than we do. And we have no idea, if we'll take our hands off the outcome, how God will use the process to bless up our lives. But if we're holding on to the outcome, we're just going to mess up our lives. Now, here's the crazy thing as we wrap this up. Here's how we know that the forgiveness hack worked for David. Years later, Saul's been chasing David all over the country, making his life miserable for years now. And one day, Saul dies. And someone comes to David to give him the news. Say, Saul, your enemy, the guy who made your life a living hell, is dead. So question, how do you react when you find out that the person who abused you and discredited you and chased you and sought to harm you is dead? How do you react? Do you celebrate? Do you breathe a sigh of relief? Do you go home and tell your wife, hey, we're going out for dinner tonight? It's a good day. Saul's dead. Here's how David responds. David and his men, that's important, tore their clothes in sorrow when they heard the news. They mourned and wept and fasted all day for Saul. How? It's very simple. The weight wasn't there anymore. David didn't hear that Saul was dead and all of a sudden bump up against his own resentment and bitterness and hurt. That had all been moved. So he genuinely grieved. Why? Because he was able to look through the Saul and see the goodness of the God who was in control the whole time. And I think it's really telling that he had some guys around him. These are the same guys who years before were in the back of the cave going, "Get him, Dave." So they had matured. But he had some people around him now that he'd been doing life with. And they had rubbed off on each other in a good way, like iron sharpening iron. You know, you need some people in your life who won't just reinforce your resentment. Listen, you need some people in your life who also remember how the Lord forgave them. You need some other followers of Jesus in your life, helping you navigate this story, helping you navigate this life. You need a J group. One of the best ones, if this message really hits home for you, might be a Freedom J group. You can find those on our website. It's about letting go of your yesterdays and the things that have piled up, the hurts that you have. But David gets to this place in his life where the weight has been moved. And he's able to grieve the death of the person who hated him the most. So how do you do that? Well, first you remember that the Lord forgave you, and then you release the hurt to God. I'm challenging you this week to stop having imaginary conversations with the person who has hurt you and have a real conversation with the God who can heal you this week. Might even want to do it today. Find a place, put it all out there with God. Then there's a choice to release the person to God. I'm challenging you by God's grace to cut the string that tethers your soul to somebody else's behavior. They don't define you. God defines you. Release the person. But you don't know what they said about me, but you don't know what they did. They're not God. Release them. Come on, it's a strong word from the Lord for you today. Release the person to God. And then the third thing is release the outcome. God, your ways are higher than my ways. I know that you cause all things to work together for the good of those who love you and are called according to your purpose. And God, I love you and I'm called according to your purpose. There's no way this won't turn out right if I will take my hands off and surrender my life to you. That's the life hack. It's life hack number 2. And if you need it this week, I want you to do something very simple. You don't have to indicate what it is, but if this hits home, you would say, I need this in my life. Would you just lift your hand up and hold it up high? Just hold it up high. Watching online, put a hand raise emoji in the comments. Just say, I need this. It's for me. It's a simple step. But let me pray over us. Father, we come to you, and first we pause and remember how you forgave us. God, I personally remember how you forgave me. I was dead in my sin, and I couldn't earn my way to you. I couldn't be good enough. I couldn't be religious enough. I couldn't be holy enough. I had no way of getting to you, so you got to me through your Son, Jesus Christ. I remember the good news. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for unconditionally forgiving me. Show me how I can do that toward others in my life who have wronged me so I can be free. While you let God speak to you for a moment more, for some of you today, the good news about Jesus that you need so desperately to know in your life is that this is what he has done for us. Through his death on the cross, he completely forgave us. You don't have to earn, it's not like God 98% forgives you and then you got to earn that last 2%. He doesn't forgive us and put us on probation. He has forgiven you through the blood of his Son. Jesus' death pays the price for every sin you have ever committed or will ever commit. And when you put your faith in Jesus, that's where you actually receive the power to live a life that pleases God. You don't figure it out on your own. It's through faith in Jesus. And if you want to begin that relationship today, this is your moment. Right where you are, whisper out a prayer, something like this with faith in your heart. Jesus, I believe in you today. I believe you died to forgive my sins. I am forgiven by faith in you. Because of your death, I am made alive. I trust you with my life. I turn away from the life I've lived without you. I turn to you. And if that's you, while everyone around you is still focused on God, if you would say, that's me, I want you to lift your hand, just hold it up high. Again, it's a simple step, but if you would say, I'm starting a relationship with God for myself today, for real, lift it up, hold it up high, yeah. Watching online, type the word faith in the comments, whatever platform you're on right now. Let us know, I'm taking this step, putting my faith in Jesus. And then all of us, would you help me? Come on, let's put our hands together. Let's give thanks to our God.